The first time I went to Malmo, Sweden to see Aimpoint, I met Eric Oss, who's one of their trainers, and he had a drawer full of fake counterfeit Aimpoints. And even some of them had tried to copy the logo of the Aimpoint, but because, the logo isn't done just right, it's easy to pick out. Some of them were not so easy, but he showed me everything that made them counterfeit that he could tell. Some of it was a glue line around the rear window. And some of it was, he had me hold up an Aimpoint and he goes, go ahead and adjust the intensity dial. And I just rolled it from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it stopped. And he goes, Aimpoint has more than 5 settings. And then when you did that, it turned on, turned off, turned on, turned off, turned on, turned off. You could see the switching. Aimpoints has a smooth intensity transition between intensity levels. And that's one of the distinctive ways to tell its quality.
Good morning, Eric. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, no problem. What would you like to talk about?
All kinds of stuff, brother. We're going to start out with me telling how we met very briefly, and then I want to hear how you got to be a gun writer, because that's a very cool story. For those unfamiliar with Eric, he is the 14th editor-in-chief of Guns and Ammo magazine. Let me tell the story real quick. I got to go back a few years. It's been almost to the day, Eric, 17 years ago that we met at a Blackhawk Gun Writers event, which was my first Gun Writers event. Didn't know anybody. We shot all day. Todd Jarrett, I don't know if you remember, was out there teaching us stuff on the range, and you and I were shooting next to each other. And as luck would have it, I missed the bus that evening to go to dinner. But I saw you headed to your vehicle, so I flagged you down and caught a ride with you, and that turned out to be a very meaningful experience for me. Kind of changed the course of my life in a way. And you asked me if I was interested in writing for the gun magazines. At the time, you were a staff writer with Harris Publications, and I was the defensive tactics editor of Officer.com. And of course, I said yes. And then, boom, here we are, 17 years of gun writing. You moved over to Outdoor Sportsman Group and headed up their SIP division and brought me with you. And everywhere you've went, which has only been up, I've ridden on your coattails. So I appreciate that. But what I really want to hear is your story, how you got into gun writing, because it is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a fun time. Yeah, at the time we met, I had just left working at Blackwater down there in Moyock, North Carolina, and I was living on the Virginia side. So that event was in Norfolk at Blackhawk's former headquarters, and it was a convenient drive for me to go to those events. But yeah, that was great experience. So you've always been a good friend. Early on when I got into becoming an editor, I was reading gun magazines of the era and gun books and realizing that a lot of the information that was being put into those publications was from guys of the Vietnam generation and interwar years, post-Vietnam, up to the first Persian Gulf War. And I just thought I could recognize, using my own Marine Corps background, more current information and perhaps filter the next generation of writers, which included yourself. So when I met you, when I met Tom Beckstrand, it was all during that period, roughly. Kind of swore my allegiance that if I met a really solid individual who was easy to work with, I would try and collect them all and start putting them in magazines and build the next generation of experts. And look, here we are now. So
yeah, it's been a very fun team to be on over all these years. For sure.
And that's how I look at it. It's a team.
Yeah.
It's always been a team.
Tell us about your desire to be a gun writer and a letter that you wrote. And that's pretty cool.
I could do this a few different ways, but I'll start with that. I was at Virginia Military Institute, and I was destined to be a fifth yearman. So I'd gotten suspended for a semester at VMI and had to go active duty in the Marines for a while. And I'd come back and trying to reflect on what I really wanted to do. Did I want to become a Marine Corps officer? Or did I want to try my hand at civilian life? And at that time, the NRA was interested in having me join the collegiate shooting programs because I was also a competitive shooter at VMI. One night, of course, I'm serving a lot of detention. Even after I came back from my suspension, I was on a 6-month detention room confinement, but I was allowed access to go to one of the research labs and study in certain places on campus while I served my punishment. So while everybody else had a weekend, went home or went out in town and enjoyed, I had nothing to do but go to the computer lab. And I decided to try out the internet. And, the internet was still somewhat of a novel thing at the time. We didn't have computers or laptops necessarily issued to us as they do these days. So I had to go to computer lab to access anything like email or the internet. And I started looking at gunsandammo.com on the website. And I was kind of interested, how did these guys become gun writers or editors? And there was a bio page on the website. And I scrolled down, and Wiley Clapp's background caught my attention. He had been a VMI graduate as well. He had been in the Marines. He became a Marine officer. I could relate to that, being a Marine. And then he had gone on and worked for, I believe, Orange County Sheriff's Department in California. My dad had started his law enforcement career as a LA County Sheriff officer. So I felt like I could relate to him that way. And for some reason, I just decided to write him a letter and ask, how did you become a gun writer? Sent that in. And I didn't really expect a response. I never expected one to be published in the pages, Guns and Ammo magazine. But my dad called me, which was on, dial-up phones at that time. And we all shared these phones in a concourse between barracks. I think we had access to like 10 phones while we were at VMI, and, all about 5-10 minute times when there was a line waiting. So I get a call from my dad, note, hey, call your dad back. And he said, what are you doing writing Guns and Ammo magazine? Are you trying to embarrass the family? Like, he just chewed me out like I'd done something wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I didn't originally remember what I wrote to Wiley. So I was like, did he maybe expand on what I said? Or, well, Dad read me the letter, and it was published in Wiley Clapp's handgunning column. And he explained that there's only one person that I've ever seen set out to be a gun writer who actually became one. It's a very tough career to ever achieve. You're better off going out, living a life, getting experience in various fields, and then coming back, and maybe trying when you've got loads of knowledge about a passionate subject. And if you're still interested, then maybe you can submit a query or submit an article, and you might get published one day. That person, the one person he knew, he was referencing at the time, was Mike Duke Venturino. He was the only one who set out from college to be a gun writer, who immediately became a gun writer. And as we all know, he had a successful career with Guns and Ammo magazine under the Peterson publishing days, and then ultimately went on to work with FMG Publications and Guns magazine. And it was a lot of fun to read a lot of those Old West style articles from him that he specialized in. He just recently passed away too, as did Wiley. Wiley Clapp passed away. But anyways, I took that as an insult from Wiley. Like he was digging on me. So I went from, I'm going to be a Marine Corps aviator, to I'm going to give my hand a chance at building a career, building a resume that is perfect to be selected as a gun writer for Guns and Ammo. And that was my pivot point. And I thought if it didn't work out, I could always fall back, become a Marine officer. I was still in my early 20s, so that was still a doable achievement. And I got on, at the NRA and worked in the competitive shooting division. I was in the reserves in the Marines at the time. I got stationed to a light armor reconnaissance unit at Fort Detrick, Maryland. So on the weekends and in summers, I'd be training with them. And then leading up to 2002, there was the feeling that we were going to be going to war. So we started training a lot more on learning intelligence about what was in Saddam Hussein's Iraqi Republican Guard in terms of armor and equipment. and I volunteered. They needed 2 designated marksmen. Our unit had Sergeant Con Wen. He was a school-trained scout sniper for the Marines, but they needed to fill one more slot to be fill the role of a designated marksman. And at the time, designated marksman was really a term that was unheard of. They were trying to develop the program, but they wanted volunteers. And when you're in an infantry unit like we were, with light armor, everybody's already got these roles and jobs. And my primary job was as a small arms repair. I was the armorer for the company, the armory chief. And on the side, I was also a primary marksmanship instructor. I taught rifle and pistol shooting. So I raised my hand, and my executive officer, Dave Duhamel, said, okay, you're going to be one of these. And I started going through training to become a designated marksman. And then when we got called up and deployed in Iraq, we were called up in January and, actually spent some time in Camp Lejeune preparing to go to war, and then, ended up going, over to Kuwait first, doing more training for the month of February 2002 before we staged at the border Kuwait. And then I was part of that initial invasion, into Iraq. And then after the 1st Marine Division started filtering out, after getting to Baghdad in May 2003, I got retained, and I stayed in Iraq, a bit longer, leading up to the winter of 2003. So, and then my jobs changed a little bit. So I deployed as a designated marksman. I became, I was also working as an armorer for our company, which was attached to 3rd Light Armor Reconnaissance Division. And then, we were involved in all the combat that was, watched on the news at the time. I knew it was going to be kind of a momentous moment. So while I was over there, anytime I came in contact with small arms, I was taking photos and I was recording my green notebooks, all the information and markings on them, knowing that one day I may write an article from this. Having just been here, it may be sellable. And sure enough, American Rifleman magazine picked up that article I sent them. Handguns of Operation Iraqi Freedom was part 1. And that was the first time I was published in a major magazine. There was also a more youth-minded magazine that they produced called Insights at the time for teenage ages. And I wrote a specialized youth article for them about the invasion. And then later on, they also published a Rifles of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Before I knew it, they offered me a job to be they had to kind of create a job for me in NRA publication. So I became the first real armorer for the National Rifle Association. So I serviced, repaired, maintained, and also supported the publications with maintaining their T&E guns, their permanent inventory. And that gave me opportunities to get more into gun writing and writing about things that maybe they didn't have the bandwidth from their staff editors. And it really helped pique my interest. I was also involved in writing the NRA Firearms source book that was credited to John Zent, who is the editorial director at the time. And he taught me everything I know, really, him and Mike Nishalke, about editing. And that's when I knew I'm going to be an editor one day. And I kind of shifted gears a little bit, but the NRA didn't pay very much at the time. I mean, I was making like $35,000 a year, and more than half my paycheck was going to rent. And I lived across the street from NRA headquarters, and I was walking to work to save money. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and got to a point where I'm like, I'm not going to be able to live here much longer. I'm running out of cash, basically. And in 2006, as it came to be, I had a lieutenant colonel friend who remembered me from the Marines, says, I work for this company called Blackwater, and they have some issues. There's an armorer that's going to prison for selling machine guns to Currituck, or not Currituck, maybe it was Camden County Sheriff's Department officers. I don't know. It was a big, weird situation. And we need someone to help clean up the system. So they offered me a job, and I drove from NRA, and I left them. And I was a little sad to do that because I had a pension I was building. But I drove on my last $20 bill in a Ford Mustang and pulled up on fumes and started my job at Blackwater. So and that turned out to be probably one of the best jobs in my entire life. It was so much fun to work among tier 1 level colleagues and service them as an armor and ultimately work some other fun jobs too. But just like you did as a police officer, I was writing on the side, and Harris Publications found me that way.
Yeah, Eric. And it's hard to have a better collateral duty, if you will, as a gun writer than being an armorer, because you have all the skills that I, especially when I first started gun writing, really lacked. I knew quite a bit about tactics because of my law enforcement training. But when it came to guns, I remember, like, if it wasn't a Glock or a Colt M4, I didn't know what the heck it was. You know what I'm saying? So that's something that I've had to kind of overcome over the years. What a great knowledge to have of being an armorer. It's so transferable to being a gun writer. It must have been a huge advantage. For me, I think what you saw in me as a police officer and a SWAT officer at the time was that I had some knowledge of tactics and stuff that I could bring to the table. But I've had to learn the hardware side sort of as I went along. And it's been quite a journey. But, you know, I remember initially, if it wasn't a Glock or a Colt M4, you know, I didn't know anything about it. So interesting stuff.
Well, the thing about you knew how to write short, simple sentences. And I like Ernest Hemingway. I figured I could start with that. You had, noun, verb, adjective. I could help you fill in the rest as an editor. I'm kind of helping you. I'm taking what you know in your message and I try to boil that down. What are you trying to say? Talk conversationally and let the editor make the sentence coherent.
Yeah.
One thing I learned from Craig Boddington, which he was an editor, one of his first jobs. Every new editor of Guns and Ammo in the time of Elmer Keith had to start with editing Elmer Keith's work. He was a very tough edit. Now he's regarded as a great writer. He had a lot of interesting experiences and was very opinionated. He was an authority on guns, came to Guns and Ammo in the early 60s, stayed until his death in 1984. And in, I think, 1977 to about 1981, Craig Boddington worked with Elmer Keith. And he said when Elmer would send in an article, it would be one continuous sentence from the start to the end with no breaks, no commas, no transitions. And at the very end of the article, there was period, 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 comma, 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 semicolon, semicolon, exclamation point. Note to editor, I know this article has these. Please put them where they're supposed to go. And he did it all in a typewriter. So I just found that hilarious anecdote. If you want to be a writer, you can be. Just trust the editor is going to make you look good.
What I've always done, Eric, is using simple sentences and stuff probably wasn't a conscious decision. That's just how I talk. And I try to make it.
That's how you wrote police reports.
Yeah, well, I try to make it like as though I were teaching someone, because as a cop, I was an instructor in a lot of different disciplines. And so I was pretty good at conveying information verbally. So I just tried to do the same thing on paper. And I didn't really have any formal, journalism background or anything like that, but it's worked pretty well. Eric, talk a little bit how your experience as an armor, both at Blackwater, also in the Marine Corps and at Blackwater and at NRA, how do you think that gives you a unique perspective on like emerging trends and things like that in the firearms industry versus someone who doesn't have that type of experience?
Well, an actual armor, a school trained armor. Now they're two different types because there are people that may attend a Glock armor school. You probably have. A lot of police officers do that. It's like a 1-day class typically. And now you're given this title armor, but I started out doing an intensive program with at the U.S. Army's Aberdeen Ordnance. It's now at a different location, but the classic was there. And we spent a week on individual firearm systems, everything from the M9 pistol to artillery pieces, mortars included. And what you tend to learn is the nuances of each of those systems and the commonalities. So being a really good armor is about troubleshooting. How good of a troubleshooter are you to take some symptoms, to quickly diagnose it, and then take it to the field, because now you're doing it in the field. And then how do I repair it? The learning how to take something apart and put it back together turns out to be the easy thing. It's correctly and quickly diagnosing the problem and getting it back up to service. And once you learn that, the mechanics of taking gun apart and put it back together is actually pretty easy. You learn in a professional schooling how not to scratch a gun, how to dress it up and fix and correct certain things. However, what you're really learning is how to troubleshoot in the field and do all of that if you drop a roll pin, for example, you might be dropping it in the grass or in the sand. Good luck finding it. So you learn techniques of how to hold your hand, how to use tools, and the proper use of every tool. A lot of people use a hammer for almost everything when not realizing there's probably 13 different types of hammers, and they all have a unique knowledge. Now, you can't always take all your hammers to the field, so maybe take one or two that are appropriate for the majority of the work you do. And that, what spare parts do I take? I don't need to necessarily take every part of a gun. So you start to learn the failure points that each of the firearm types have. That gives you the knowledge you're talking about, because when you go to write about it, I've also learned the nomenclature, because in school we had a practical exam where we had to actually troubleshoot, diagnose, fix, repair a known broken classroom gun. And we also had a written exam, fill in the blank, true and false. And it wasn't easy. And that ensured and it reinforced that you retain the knowledge of the class. How that translates into gun writing was, I was built with the knowledge of nomenclature, how to communicate and accurately describe parts, their relationship, how they work with other parts, how they're put together. And when I go to write my articles, a lot of time when I get to the technical descriptions of guns, I am working in my head how a system works. What are the major components? What makes this gun's approach to the system different than this approach? For example, a lot of people, let's take Glock, for example. It's an easy reference point. There are a lot of so-called clones of Glocks out there. But if you look at every different version of a Gen 3 Glock clone that you may see out there, there's actual nuances that make them different. Which means there's new nomenclature that's introduced. So say, for example, a Turkish made Stoger, SR pistol, STR pistol, may look similar to a Glock, but it's not 100% like a Glock. Parts don't interchange. There are nuances about it that make it typical to the way Turkey manufactures firearms and not the way Glock manufactures firearms. So you take a Shadow Systems pistol. It may, in some ways, a lot of times be categorized very similarly to a Glock. But when I analyze it for the reader and I'm writing my article, there's hardly anything that's relevant to a Glock. It's system wise, it may be a similar concept, but as gun writers, we have to really dissect and discern what makes these special, because we all know parts wear together differently. Things affect accuracy potential of each of the firearms. So, all of that experience being an armorer helped me as a writer and provide me with a little bit of a different approach.
Yeah, I think you're able to recognize the nuances a lot more, where at a glance, a Shadow Systems may appear to be a Glock clone, but that doesn't mean it actually is a Glock clone. It's similar to Glock in appearance, maybe, and dimensionally or whatever. But yeah, there are those nuances that I could see would be easier for you to pick up than someone who doesn't have that training. And to your other point about taking guns apart and putting them back together, earlier in my law enforcement career, I was sent to a 3-day AR-15 armorers course, and I could take it apart and put it back together like nobody's business, but I didn't have any idea on what made it run. So I had to learn that after the course, believe it or not. But yeah, it's important to understand the why, that's,
yep.
And at the Glock armor course, for instance, it's a 1-day thing typically where you're just, come on. I mean, you're not an armorer. You just, you can take apart a Glock. That's not high level armory skills.
Well, and just as you've learned and I've learned how to value the term armorer, and it's an honorable term for someone who's gone through a lot of training to be an armorer. I've actually been through 53 factory trained armorer classes, armorer schools, I should say, around the country, because in some of these schools, I'm learning 2 or 3 systems before I graduate. I've been overseas, 38 different countries, Romania. I've gone to a lot of the factory schools that are overseas, Czech Republic. I've done them here everywhere in the United States. I love picking up also the teaching techniques and how to communicate from an instructor point of view. If you can teach it, you understand it. And that's given me a lot of unique and relevant experience into being a writer and an editor. And when you submit your article, I'm looking out for you. When I go and read your articles, I'm trying to see maybe you use the wrong terminology for something, and I'll change that word on your behalf and make you sound more smart.
Hey, I could always use that, brother. I want to talk a little bit. There's so many directions to go in with someone with your experience, Eric. But one of the things I want to talk about is you are also a history buff, and you are a collector of sort of some historic firearms. Is there anything in your collection, like is there one item that really stands out to you or has a particular meaning?
Well, we could always go back to our first gun. I started shooting when I was 4 years old. My dad, being a police officer for a time, served as a range master in Ridgecrest, California. And he and my mom would take us out shooting with my little sister. My little sister was often shooting a Ruger 1022 with an extended aftermarket magazine. Used to drive me nuts because I had to load it for her, and it would take her about 3 seconds to unload it. Whereas I was shooting a Remington nylon 66, and I was a lot more determined to be precise, to shoot accurately, hit the 10 ring every time. And my sister was just blasting away. So different contrasting things, but that certainly has an influence on me. When I got the chance, I had one, I had my nylon 66. My dad passed away in 2017, and I ended up sending it off to Turnbull Restoration, which he had a laugh at, because here he's used to restoring classic single action armies of historical significance. And here I am sending in what at the time was a $400 nylon 66. And I said, hey, can you re-blue it? Can you make it look like it's brand new again? And it's just very thin sheet metal. He told me he would never do it again because it was very difficult to not burn through the metal and everything. The sheet metal on there is just kind of a faux receiver. What actually holds the action in the operating system of that is the polymer nylon stock that was developed between Remington and DuPont. And then the metal plate that gave it a traditional appearance is actually just a folded stamp sheet of steel that has a serial number on it. It doesn't technically need to be on there to fire the gun. But I guess you could argue it's there for safety's sake. So thereby it's a receiver. But anyways, that's one of them. But the majority of historical firearms I own, I have come into them either by people who I get the stories about, or they have a military collection tied to it. When I was at VMI, one of the influences in my life was my rifle team coach. I was a 4-time varsity NCAA Division I rifle shooter, and got to compete with, at the time, guys who would go on to the Olympics. Matt Emmons at the time, University of Alaska, was a big competitor. He was an amazing shooter. Well, because we were also part of the military school in the ROTC system, our rifle coach was First Sergeant Jim Thorpe, and not the football player, but he was a decorated war hero from Vietnam, and he created the rifle team for us. And as part of our training, we had, after our academic portion of the day, we had a military duty that was required. He brought out an entire collection from the hand cannon to the M16, which was possessed by the Army ROTC department. So it was U.S. government property. And everything in between, from trapdoor Springfields, we had Brown Bess, the lever action 1903 A3s, and all of the members of the rifle team would have be assigned a firearm, and we'd have to learn everything there is to know about it. And so then we would go out during a military duty, and the Corps of Cadets would cycle through, and we would have to give a presentation on each of those firearms that we were assigned. So we'd learn everything we could about them, memorize it to a 3x5 index card, and then go out, give a speech. And then the cadets were allowed to fire, say, one shot out of a hand cannon or a trapdoor Springfield, or maybe a 20-round magazine out of the M16, and or an M14, or an M1 Garand, an M1 carbine. That way, the belief system was that when each of those cadets graduated and went off to become Army officers, Marine Corps officers, Navy officers, what have you, they had a prerequisite experience of the evolution of martial arms in the United States. And I have been on a quest to replicate that ever since I graduated. So I've been purchasing firearms that kind of fit that bill. And in hopes, he passed away and no longer runs that program at BMI. I would love to be able to put on a mobile training operation where I'm teaching officer candidates who may never get a chance to shoot such a variety of historically significant firearms to the U.S. history, and bring that education to them once again as it was given to me. It's made me a very passionate collector and shooter of those firearms, and that's my quest.
That's very cool, dude. And you are an instructor. Some people may recognize you as the editor of Guns and Ammo, or the host of the Guns and Ammo Buzz podcast, or they've seen you on Guns and Ammo TV, but they may not know that one of the things that you do is you provide firearms training. And you provided a very unique course in the past, which was like an armor/red dot operator course for law enforcement, right?
Yes, that was a fun one. I did here locally with, it started out with just a single unit, but then I started getting invites to teach other units. If I had more time, I would do more classes, but and I've done more complicated courses. I've done some vehicle dynamic training, and that was really a benefit. When I worked at Blackwater, a lot of the time I was single and I had the weekends to myself. And whenever you had vacation time, I didn't have anywhere to go. So I volunteered to take free enrollment in whatever class was being taught at Blackwater, from a rifle pistol operator course to a SWAT team entry course.
What a cool perk, Eric. What a cool perk.
It was best perk ever, right? State Department would come in and do, they called it WIPS training, WPPS. It was a State Department contract, and we'd go out and drive Suburbans or Crown Vics around their high speed track.
That place is crazy.
Tons of driving training. It was just, shooting from helicopters with the Coast Guard. I ran miniguns, and not only that, as an armorer, they loved having me in the class because, I help, whenever a gun goes down, training pauses, right? So I would get the gun fixed and we'd be back shooting quicker than they would had I not been in the class. So that was a lot of fun. It gave me it diversified my experience to also write from and, have it as a reference, but, it's, I look so fondly back on that. It's unfortunate it kind of went down the way it did, but met a bunch of great people, still in touch with them today.
Eric, tell us about, your podcast, the Guns and Ammo Buzz podcast.
All right. So, the Buzz podcast, we'd been actually talking about doing a podcast for a little more than 3 years. It had been almost killed in committee a few times where, we'd have a bunch of people want to insert some ideas. Hey, let's do this. Let's do that. Or no, we need this certain equipment. Well, we have to get, sign off on, work order propositions in order to purchase this microphone or this camera or what have you. And after about 3 years, Marshall Holloway, I got to give him a lot of credit. Wintercom, I'm just like,
love Marshall.
He's like, we might get in trouble for this. But why don't we just go ahead and do it? And we make a bunch of episodes until someone says we can't do it. or we do a good job. And then they're like, well, here's you some money to maybe make it better. So we started it in December 2024. We filmed 3 recordings right off the bat, and it quickly became the most popular, item on gunsandammo.com, and then increased our YouTube subscription really quick to about 67,000 subscribers. I mean, and then we were on all the podcast sources, a big learning curve. And the idea was, hey, we're going to take what's in the magazine, and people may not be subscribed to Guns and Ammo magazine for various reasons, print, digital, what have you. We've got a lot of different ways to consume it. So let's reach out to people who maybe would love to glean some information about a brand new gun or news that's going on in the industry, and we'll put it in on the podcast. So, we started out with the launch of the Kimber 2K11, and the morning that the 2K11 was launched, we had a video podcast already prepped and packaged and ready to deliver to the audience. So if they didn't see it in the magazine or on our website, maybe they saw it on the YouTube feed, or maybe they saw it on, Apple Podcast channel. Or we have podcasts in all of the popular venues that you would, get that. And we're still expanding. I'm still learning a lot. I'm not the best host like you are.
It's not as easy as it looks, brother, is it?
No, it's a lot of prep and planning, and even people behind the scenes. I give shout outs to all those people, because there's a skill to even just managing and producing one of these things. Yeah. So we're going to get better, though. And the important thing, the why, you talked about that before. We need more voices. It's kind of competitive, and sometimes those who have bigger platforms, more subscribers, more views, might marginalize another startup, might marginalize someone who's competing for the same advertising dollar that's being put out there. But it's important that gun owners, law-abiding citizens who own guns, want to own guns, who are looking for information, have access to that information. We're being attacked from any number of different angles. And it seems as though if they can suppress our ability to communicate with fellow gun owners, people are interested in protecting themselves or competing in a match, we're going to eventually reduce the number of participants we have in these areas, and people may make uneducated decisions. And, sometimes too, people get things wrong. Well, when you've got a lot of different people putting on podcasts, you're eventually going to come across the right information. I would love to see more and more people talk about guns, and let's popularize this and maybe generate this a grassroots movement to be sure that the gun owner is always heard. Whether it's us doing the talking, someone we work with, one of our colleagues, or a competitor, or maybe even someone's just watching and, wants to produce their own. I hope more people get involved in, whether it's producing YouTube videos or podcast. I think all forms of media, including print, which, a lot of people write off as just being a dinosaur thing. It's, but it's not dead. And there is a segment of the shooting audience that still depends on print. I can tell you, at least from our standpoint, it's about 400,000 subscribers, not to include the remaining newsstand sales we have, that depend on that information. Now, they may also watch YouTube videos. We all do. They may also go to manufacturer websites. When you purchase a firearm or purchase ammunition or look for an optic, you often look at multiple sources and compare information before, especially something that requires several $100s of your own personal finances. And it's important to do that research before you do it. And I think as many of us as possible that are interested and capable of putting together these pieces of media need to be getting together and doing that.
Yeah. Well said, Eric. And that's a very interesting podcast. If you guys haven't checked it out, I suggest you do so. That's one of the things that I really like about Outdoor Sportsman Group, which of course is the parent company for Guns and Ammo, is that it truly is multimedia. I mean, we have podcasts now forever. We've had the Outdoor channel and the Sportsman channel. We have digital content, and of course, print magazines. We're hitting it from every angle, so that it's really cool and it's fun.
Don't forget the My Outdoor TV streaming.
See, there's so many. I can't even keep up with them, brother. But no, it's awesome. And as an employee, or me as like an independent contractor, I guess you could say, it's neat because you do get an opportunity to do so many different things as opposed to just writing an article for a print magazine. It keeps things interesting. And I think that, that's really one of the great things about Outdoor Sportsman Group is just how big of a reach it has and how, multifaceted it is. It's not just a print publication. So very cool stuff there.
The other thing I love about working for the Outdoor Sportsman Group in general, I've crossed over and helped Peterson's Hunting Magazine, for example. We share a lot of interest. When you get us all together, we often tend to cross over, but everybody's vetted. You don't come to Guns and Ammo without having a high level of authority in a specific subject or background. Our rifle and optics editor, Tom Beckstrand, a West Point graduate, a school trained scout sniper. He's been through the Marine Corps advanced programs, got 4 deployments, 2 to Iraq, 2 Afghanistan. He's been to almost every rifle and optics manufacturer out there and understands the nuances of all the details that discern the differences between them. And he communicates like someone having a conversation at a barbecue. So we have the best talent in any category.
Yep.
You're the gun tech editor, and it just, I love the team. It's more than you're not just an independent contractor. You're a teammate, and we're all looking out for each other.
No, that's true. We just had Tom on a week or two ago. He's awesome, man. And what a wealth of knowledge and experience he brings. I remember back in the day, early on, we were at one of the Outdoor Sportsman Group's roundtables, which is an event that we host yearly, with several manufacturers that come and show us their latest and greatest products. And we get to kind of handle that stuff before most other people do. So I remember you introduced me to someone. You're like, this is like Tom Beckstrand, but law enforcement. And I'm like, I'm not sure who that is. But later when I realized who Tom Beckstrand was, I'm like, oh, I'll take that. Squared away guy. Tom is a great dude. But no, that's part of it, is just the cast of characters that we get to work with. It actually makes it fun. Every job is work, and we certainly work, but there's a lot of fun involved as well. I'd like to talk to you a little bit, Eric, about red dots. And I know that you've done some instructing. So not only are you proficient as an end user, but you have also been in the industry to see the meteoric rise of red dots, especially like pistol mounted optics, let's say. So,
sure.
What's your take on, the value of a red dot sight, let's say on a pistol? And then, how do you think it is for a new shooter rather, to learn a red dot versus someone who's transitioning to a dot from a lot of experience with iron sights?
Those are big topics there. And if I forget to go back to each of them, because I ramble on too long about something, just circle me back or remind me again. But, I'll first say I was introduced to red dots, in the Marines in 1997. Our unit was issued about 138, Aimpoints. And that was one of my first exposures, to it. And when we put them on, our M16 A2s at the time, we had to have an adapter, for the carry handle, in order to work around that sighting system. But it was, immediately obvious that it was intuitive. I had experience shooting rifles even well before I joined the Marine Corps, and, but scores shot up, for people that used them. It was an optional, thing. Not everybody did. Obviously there's a lot of traditionalists who just want to keep things the same. And I respect that. But a lot of the younger guys, like, 17-year-old me at the time, was interested in, hey, let's give this a shot. And I remember seeing this iconic image, of General Norman Schwarzkopf coming down from a building in, I believe it was Kuwait, probably. It might have been Iraq, but I believe it was Kuwait. And he was surrounded by, security at the time, some of them Delta, and they had, their, version, the M4 carbine, equipped with an Aimpoint, and I zoomed in. I remember seeing that picture, trying to figure out what optic is that on there. It was awesome. But that was, a little bit of what triggered me to learn more about using red dots on guns was that history. As a competitive shooter, I remember starting to see Aimpoint red dots on pistols. So I transitioned from being a small bore air rifle shooter at VMI, and I was interested in picking up, action pistol competitions at the time, as well as high power rifle. When I went to Camp Perry one year, I found this vintage Aimpoint electronic.
Nice.
So that's one of the first Aimpoints I ever got.
That's what started it all, man.
Really cool. Yeah, it goes back. I think this one is from the late 1970s, about 1977. Still, so the craziest thing is when I picked it up at that point, it was probably 25 years old, but I just turned the power switch on and it worked all of about 10 seconds. And then the battery died.
That's awesome, man.
Not bad for a 30-year-old battery.
Yeah, no kidding. Eric, Aimpoint just had their 50th anniversary, which you were very involved with, putting together a publication for that. And you wrote about the Aimpoint Koa. And I know that you're a fan of the Koa. Tell us a little bit about what you like so much about that.
Well, one, I think it's the most thoroughly developed optic, and its A-cut interface with the slide is ingenious. It is currently the apex of optics technology at the moment. The front of the Koa is like a triangular wedge that wedges into the front of the slide. These parallel ridges that go, right and left between the front wedge and a rear wedge prevents any lateral movement of the optic, but in a very clean way without the need for screws. And then the rear wedge becomes a wedge when you put on the rear sight, which features 2 screws. But what I love about that configuration is there's no recoil energy that's passed on to those screws. And that's one of the problems we've seen with some optic mountings, especially when you start stacking tolerances with mounting plates and then additional thread screws. And then some pistols, such as 1911s, don't give you a lot of room for deep threaded screws. So there's not a lot of engagement, and you got to use, Loctite to keep, ensure that your screws aren't going to back out while you're shooting. And part of the reason screws back out, if you've ever had one back out on a red dot, is because those recoil forces, get transferred through the slide, through the optic into those screws, which are they're almost like bosses. And they just sort of rattle loose. Once they start backing out, it's easy for them to get loose. The Koa doesn't suffer from that at all whatsoever. And it's the only optic, in my knowledge right now, that doesn't put the recoil forces on the screws. And it uses the front notch, that front wedge, and the rear wedge created by the clamping of the rear sight to keep it in place. And in my opinion, it's the standard. It's the next bar that has to be met by anyone else. I just wish all the other optic companies would make it easy on our readership and be like, we're going to adopt the A-cut. Let's go ahead and just give Aimpoint the nod. Good job. And, to that end, right now, to enjoy that experience, you need a Koa optic. I love the Koa sight.
I love how low it sits. And I also like that based on the complete footprint of the optic, which is very small, the window appears very large. So it's almost like the dot's just floating there. Yeah. If you as a viewer or listener haven't experienced that, I highly recommend it. It's kind of game changing. And then moving on a little bit, Eric, to Aimpoint's newest release is the RDS-MR. Have you had a chance to mess with that yet?
Just once, and it wasn't a T&E piece for me, but you could tell me a little bit more about it. I've played with it a little bit, but I'm not an expert on it yet.
Well, what's cool is it's the RDS, but it is a multi-reticle system, which is what the MR stands for. And there's a 2 MOA dot, a 65 MOA circle, or a combination of the two. So That's kind of a first for Aimpoint, who has always been just a single dot. And so some people, like, I sort of prefer that in some applications because I think that the larger circle enables you to get some generalized target to acquisition faster, and then you still have the dot for the precision. So it's kind of a cool thing. A rifle optic, obviously, not a pistol optic.
It's also a great transition for a lot of law enforcement officers and military guys who have used that style of a reticle downrange. Maybe even some military types that left the military and became police officers. It's now familiar to them and lends easier to that transition. It helps encourage that big field of view. And if you don't have the time to make necessarily a very precise shot, and you're generally going to hit something in
good enough is good enough.
Mass. Yes. Yep. That MOA size is just perfect. It's ideal. And the other thing I love, anything really made by Aimpoint, it is made to the highest standard out there. I've been to the factory. I've actually built, my own RDS, and, actually even did an M68 once as well. A lot of fun to build those, but I got to see the technology and what makes Aimpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy for someone who doesn't know any better to buy a less expensive optic. But if you're potentially going to bet your life on this, right, whether it's for duty use or whether it's for personal protection, home defense, you want something that they say buy once, cry once. You know what I mean?
Right.
Get something good that you're going to be able to rely on and not be wondering constantly, is it going to work? Is it going to go out? Is the battery dead? Those types of things. So yeah, Aimpoint certainly has a combat proven history, as is evidenced by your example of your first introduction to Aimpoint being in the military, in the Marine Corps. So
the first time I went to Malmo, Sweden to see Aimpoint, I met Eric Oz, who's one of their trainers, and he's an amazing guy over there. And he had a drawer full of fake counterfeit Aimpoints. And even some of them had tried to copy the logo of the Aimpoint, but because, the logo isn't done just right, it's easy to pick out. Some of them were not so easy, but he showed me everything that made them counterfeit, that he could tell. Some of it was a glue line around the rear window. And some of it was, he had me hold up an Aimpoint, and he goes, go ahead and adjust the intensity dial. And I just rolled it from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it stopped. And he goes, Aimpoint has more than 5 settings,
Interesting.
And then when you did that, it turned on, turned off, turned on, turned off, turned on, turned off. You could see the switching. Aimpoints has a smooth intensity transition between intensity levels. And that's what one of the distinctive ways to
what you were looking at
quality.
Is called a lame point.
Yes, that's right. A lame point. That's exactly right. But
good stuff.
High level stuff right there. And that's why I always depend on them.
Eric, as we mentioned, you are the editor-in-chief of Guns and Ammo magazine. So if people want to find out what you're doing or what you have going on, Guns and Ammo magazine is a good place to start. gunsandammo.com. Tell people where they could find the podcast and maybe other things that you're up to, whether they're interested in reading an article that you wrote or just reading maybe an article that I wrote that you had to fix or something like that.
Well, gunsandammo.com is the first stop there. You could also go to the Guns and Ammo YouTube page. They're on all the social medias as well, at Guns and Ammo Mag. Spell out the ampersand, GUNSANDAMMO, mag. And then, you can find us on the Outdoor channel, still the Sportsman channel, and My Outdoor TV as a streaming service. And you're going to find our shows, Guns and Ammo TV included, throughout, as well as the videos that you create for us.
Yeah. Eric, I'll be filming Guns and Ammo TV next week at Gunsight. So
well, shoot well. Don't embarrass us.
It's always a good time there. Hey, brother, before I let you go, I wonder if you have any advice to an aspiring gun writer. You covered some of those things a little bit earlier, but maybe someone is like, because nowadays the industry has changed and you can, not a ton of people doing it, but you can make a living as a gun writer. What advice might you have to someone who's younger and kind of looking for what they want to do as a career, but they really think they're passionate about gun writing?
The first thing I notice with a lot of potential writers who want to get into it, they come at me with an article they want to write, and this is the way they want to do it. And then I actually have a lot of them hit me with expectations. I want to see this. I want to see this on this page. I don't want you to touch this part. This is what it needs to look like. And they miss the whole point. If I'm going to be an editor and I'm trying to put together a magazine, I've got restrictions. I got constraints, things I got to work around. They don't even ask me what article that I might be interested in purchasing. Maybe something I got to fill out the magazine on this particular topic. Maybe we just did an article on the 1911 and I don't want to do another article on another 1911. The best advice I can give to someone who wants to be a gun writer is get in touch with the editor and with a subservient attitude. How can I help you put together the magazine? What articles do you need? What can I support you with? And then if he says he only needs 1,000 words, don't give him 1,001. Try not to give him 999. Give him 1,000. There's a reason he's asking for that number. And the more you can help with those finite details, that person was easy to work with. He didn't give me any, a tough time or pushback, or he understood that I had to use pictures on a page in a certain way, to make it fill out the page perfectly. If you're easy to work with, I'm more than likely going to come back to you. Hey, you met my deadline. You met my page requirements, my word count. I'm going to give you more work because I can count on you. You weren't a hassle to work with. If you're easy to work with, I want to work with you again. That's really the best advice I can give you.
Hey, I'm not sure if I've told you this yet, Eric, but my son Wyatt, who's 30 years old, just wrote his first article for our SIP division for an upcoming magazine called Carry. And as luck would have it, it is about the Glock and Aimpoint Koa.
Right.
And it was a course that Jim Owens and Freddie Blish put on at Ben Avery Range here in Arizona. So pretty cool, man. You started a thing that's going the second generation now. So thank you so much for that, bro.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Rich.
Eric, I appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll have you back on again, and I will see you soon. Well, that's a wrap for this episode with Eric Poole. If this episode resonated with you, be sure and let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Aimpoint's Taking Aim podcast. We'll see you next time.